While the Civil War raged in the East, Colonel John Chivington, a part-time soldier and Methodist minister, launched a campaign of violence against the remaining Indians living in Colorado Territory. Gold and silver had been discovered in the region, and a flood of miners and settlers had rushed in just as they had in California a few years earlier. And like California, the white citizens of Colorado demanded the extermination of the Indian. As it turned out, in both places, the governors and local newspapers agreed with the strategy. One of the bands of the Northern Cheyenne Indian Nation in the area was led by a renowned statesman and warrior named Black Kettle. His people were aware of the atrocities committed in California following the discovery of gold there. Black Kettle didn't want his people to suffer the same fate. With this in mind, he traveled to Washington. He met with government officials and vowed to keep the peace. He was given the American flag and told that if he displayed the flag, his people would be safe from attack. Back in Colorado, Governor John Evans had other plans. Evans authorized Chivington to recruit a civilian militia. The task of killing Indians was so attractive that Chivington had no trouble getting 700 men to sign up for 100 days. He called them the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. In late November of 1864, Chivington decided to launch an attack on Black Kettle's peaceful camp at Sand Creek. After an all-night ride from Fort Lyon, the militiamen arrived just before dawn on November 29th. 4 cannons were positioned on a ridge overlooking the village as the men drank whiskey to keep warm. At first light, Chivington formed his men into an attack position. When Black Kettle was informed that soldiers were about to attack his village, he quickly raised a white flag of truce.
In the camps, all was confusion and noise. Men, women, and children rushing out of the lodges partly dressed. Women and children screaming at the sight of the troops. Men running back into the lodges for their arms. Black Kettle had a large American flag tied to the end of a long lodge pole.
My great-grandmother was in the band of Black Kettle when they were attacked. There's one little child that was walking up the creek bed, and there was a soldier there that was using the little boy as target practice. He took one shot, aimed, missed him. A second came along, tried and missed him, and a third said, "Let me kill the little devil." The little boy dropped dead. You had pregnant women whose bodies were being cut open, and the fetuses being taken from them. The private body parts of men and women were cut from them, and some of them used as saddle horns, hat bands, tobacco pouches, and put on public display in Denver City, in such a way that you would begin to ask, who is the savage in this case? It certainly was not the Cheyenne.
The Roman Emperor Nero had heard of Ireland's Wicklow Mountain gold, traded throughout Europe along an ancient Celtic route. What he hadn't heard was that while the Roman Empire used gold as money, its use by the Celts was religious in nature. Their beautiful golden objects were crafted under the watchful eyes of the Druid high priests. In addition to being displayed as a sign of personal status, these objects were thrown into sacred wells and buried in tombs as offerings to their gods. This fundamental difference in attitude has persisted for 2,000 years, as conquering armies ravished the lands of indigenous people who were unlucky enough to have gold. The native people of the Americas, Australia, and Africa are only the latest victims of this mentality.
Well, you see, the Black Hills was a very special place.
Bill Means is executive director of the International Indian Treaty Council.
The Black Hills was the center of our nation. We are the people of the Black Hills, the Lakota people. And this is where our creation story takes place. So to us, the Black Hills means as much to our people as the Vatican means to the Roman Catholic Church, or what Jerusalem means to Christians and Muslims and Jews, because we live primarily on the plains. But the Black Hills was a place where our people were buried, where we went to fasts, where we went for very special reasons. So it was a very special place, and the discovery of gold there really almost brought about the total desecration of this very sacred place. The Black Hills was part of a treaty agreement in which the United States negotiated with our people, the Lakota Nation, final treaty being in 1868. And after that treaty was signed, gold was discovered. And once gold was discovered, and then of course the army came in order to protect the settlers who were moving in with the miners into the Black Hills. So of course our Indian people, in defending their lands, were then banded as criminals. And then our nation, which was set aside in the 1868 treaty, was subsequently divided up into 6 reservations. And so then the policy of apartheid was begun as a result of the quest for gold.
Let me be a free man. Free to travel, free to stop, free to work, free to trade where I choose, free to choose my own teachers, free to follow the religion of my fathers, free to think and talk and act for myself. And I will obey every law or submit to the penalty. Chief Joseph.
We've come to know a term in international law that's becoming more accepted called ethnocide. This is a role that the churches play. They do to the mind what you can't do with the, say, the bullet. That is, converting people from traditional ways of relation to the Creator, traditional ways of worship. They destroyed a lot of that, created some of the first boarding schools, as some of us experienced, and of course took on the whole system of acculturation and assimilation.
The boarding school experience, I think, was most devastating on families because it split up a natural harmony between young children and their mother and father. Not all the kids that went to boarding school came from broken homes or alcoholic parents. The vast majority were sent to boarding school by law, by force.
You put me in your boarding school, make me learn your white man rule, be a fool. Oh, 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 oh. You put me in Chicago one cold December day. Relocation, extermination. Oh, 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 oh. You make me leave my home, my friend. Think I'll go back there again. Wounded knee, I wanna be free. Oh, 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 oh.
I grew up with a lot of the older people, listening to the stories. And those stories were inside of me. And I went into a boarding school system, and they killed those stories in that system. I came out of there totally ashamed of who I am, what I am. In the late 60s, I went back to the culture. On my own, I let my hair grow, I started speaking my language. And in one of those times, I fasted. I did the vision quest for 5 years. And one of those years, it was a beautiful night. Stars were out, and it was calm. It's just beautiful. And it was around midnight, and I got up and I prayed. And I sat down and sat there for a while, and then all of a sudden I had these like a flashbacks of Sand Creek, Wounded Knee. And every policy, every law that was imposed on us by the government and the churches hit me one at a time. One at a time. And how it affected my life. And as I sat there, I got angrier and angrier until it turned to hatred. And I looked at the whole situation, the whole picture, and there was nothing I could do. It's too much. The only thing I could do, to me, was when I come off that hill, I'm going to grab a gun and I'm going to start shooting. And go that way. Maybe then my grandfathers will honor me if I go that route. I got up and I came around and I faced the east direction. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was dawn, light, enough light to see the rolling hills out there. And right above that blue light, in that darkness, was the sliver of the moon and the morning star. And I wanted to live. I want to live. I want to be happy. I feel I deserve that. But the only way that I was going to do that was if I forgive. And I cried that morning because I had to forgive. Since then, every day I work on that commitment. Now, I don't know how many people felt it, but every one of us, if you're a Lakota, you have to deal with that at some point in your life. And you have to address that. You have to make a decision. If you don't, you're going to die on the road someplace. Either from being too drunk, or you might take a gun to your head if you don't handle those situations. So this isn't history. I mean, it's still with us. What has happened in the past will never leave us. Next 100, 200 years, it'll be with us. And we have to deal with that every day.
At that time, that was called Brainerd Indian Training School. And it was not only for the Indian kids in the area, but that's the first time in my whole life that I met all other tribes. There was Navajos, there was Hopis, and there was Seneca Oneidas, Eskimos from Alaska, and some Cherokees from Oklahoma and North Carolina. But there was Indian kids from all over that went there. And it was a school, I guess, that was there, I guess, to Christianize us and I guess set us on the right path. And I didn't even know what the meaning was at that time about being saved. They said that we had to get saved from what? I don't know. But the indoctrination part of it wasn't good. We had church 3 times a day, breakfast, noon, and an evening. After our chores in the evening, then we had night churches. So pretty much we were, just in church all that time. I started walking out because I didn't care. I wanted to go home now because nobody came after me. Well, when I was at the entrance, at the gate of the property of the school, then the principal was in a car, and he got off, and he forced me in that car, and then he took me back to their headquarters, there where him and his wife lived, and he told me to kneel down in the living room. And he had a big board. It was wider than a ruler. And the ironic thing of it was it had education on it, Board of Education. But he said that I had to be punished because I was going to set example for the other kids on running away. And he made me kneel down, and with that board, then he commenced to spanking me from my lower back and my buttocks and the back of my legs. And then he said that God loved me, and that I had to be saved. And anyway, that went on till I fell over. But it made me angry at the same time. I was just a little girl, but it made me angry, and I just straightened myself up and my clothes, and he told me to get back to school. And my family, nobody was there to stick up for me, and it was supposed to be a Christian school. But one of the things that really it just, I don't know, toughened me up, I guess. I guess you would say that. And I feel when I look back to that time, and when I look back to that time, then I think, that was like a breaking point in my spirit and in my life, where my spirit was, almost broken. But yet, because of the sacredness of the Black Hills, that was the southern Black Hills, that somehow the spirits and them, they had to have their hands over me to make me survive that physical abuse, mental abuse that I went through during that time.
Are the only true revolutionary people in the world. We're the ones that still believe that everything that is sacred and holy revolves in a circle. Because it's very simple. You look at the sun, it's round. The moon is round. The stars are round. The trees are round. The raccoon is round. The fish are round. Spider is round. You and I are round. Everything that is sacred and holy in this universe is round. And so in realizing that circle, you have to be revolutionary.
Right behind you, when you look back, the white man standing right there. Remember, he's a very dangerous man. He's waiting for you to trip. And he's waiting to you to trip to assault the universe. That you are part of this nature. So you must walk. You must walk in a very sacred way. And these are very important. We never had two masters. We only have one master, grandfather. But since the United States government to this Western Hemisphere, we have two masters. So we are confused who to believe, what to believe. But remember, we was born to be a red man.
And the reason for Dennis Banks and Clyde Balcourt to be part of the formation of the movement was they were in prison. And they saw the racism going on right in the prison. There was no religious freedom rights. And so I think they came out of the prison, the institutions, with a determination to change what they had experienced.
And I kind of chaired the first meeting, saying that we have to do something about the police brutality, about the slum housing conditions, high unemployment that we're in, and the more we talked, the more people started to ask questions. Then there was one guy out there in the audience who was saying, "Well, what kind of action are we going to do?" You know, and I'd say, "Well, we've got to form a committee. We're sick of committees. Well, these committees don't do nothing." So everything that I was talking about was being challenged by this guy, and the guy, of course, I knew, and that was Clyde Balcourt, and he wanted action right now. And we said, "Okay, we're going to go do it tomorrow morning." Well, we said, "Well, maybe Monday we can go. We can go meet with the police." "No, we want to go tomorrow morning." So I said, "All right, who wants to go tomorrow morning?" So they formed people to go see the police chief right there.
We were all there at this meeting, and so we brought together, I guess, the summation of all our lives, all our experiences at a time when I always expressed it, that we were about to be written out of history as roadkill cultures of manifest destiny.
It was called the Indian and White America. And the statistics that came out of the study was basically that Indians were living to be 44.5 years of age. That the average income on most reservations was between $1,500 and $2,000 a year. That unemployment on most reservations was as high as 80–90%. The housing, that I think at the time 40% of the American Indian housing didn't even have electricity nationally, and some reservations was higher than that. Dene Nation in particular, Navajo. The educational level of attainment for Indian students was 8.5 grades. So all these conditions were probably, and there was no question, they were the worst conditions in terms of social measurement of any ethnic group in America.
And at that time, when a white man killed an Indian, he was given manslaughter. When an Indian killed a white man, he was given first-degree murder. A form of frontier justice was going on that we knew we had to address.
How I came to know about the American Indian movement was we had a loss in our family. One of our grandpas, Raymond Yellow Thunder, was brutally murdered in Gordon, Nebraska. My mother, Grace Eagle Fox, her mother was Raymond's older sister. Her name was Annie Yellow Thunder. And that happened when he was murdered, and the family came to Dick Wilson, who was a chairman, and for help into looking into the murder of our grandpa Raymond Yellow Thunder, but there was no help from there. They went on into the BIA to ask the superintendent and those in power at the BIA for help, but there was no help. And so a relative from Porcupine, Sievert Young Bear Sr., the family contacted him, and he had found out that American Indian Movement was meeting in Nebraska. I don't know if it was Omaha or Lincoln, but they were having a national meeting there. So they sent Sievert Young Bear as a runner from the Yellow Thunder family to go to Omaha to ask AIM to come and look into the death of Raymond, and they wanted something to happen and to shake up those officials in Gordon, Nebraska.
The incident of Raymond Yellow Thunder's death, where he was an alcoholic in the streets of Gordon, Nebraska, and he couldn't defend himself when several rednecks got him isolated and started to beat up on him. Then they pushed him into a VFW hall and stripped him of his clothes and burnt him with cigarettes, and he was kind of forced to dance. Then they took him out the back door and beat him up some more and threw him in the trunk of a car where he froze to death. I think that was when the elders, traditional people in Pine Ridge, called upon AIM to do something.
Well, the FBI conduct is atrocious regarding Leonard Peltier. They started out by seeking and manufacturing a perjured affidavit by someone who they threatened to say false allegations in order to bring him back to the United States, where without that could not happen. Then they proceeded to a trial where the FBI literally withheld ballistic tests which they had done, which would have shown, and did show later, that the bullet that they claimed Leonard Peltier shot from his rifle could not have been shot from that weapon. It didn't have those markings. That was withheld. And of course, the manner in which other evidence was fabricated and people were threatened is just revolting, and it continues to this day. We've had the FBI and other law enforcement people flexing their muscles to say, don't let this person out of prison. He may have been there for 27 years. It may be that the evidence is really shaky, but keep him there.
And the trial of Leonard was very bad, but it was filled with just corruption, and they threatened. I mean, it was intimidating against the jurors, and of course he was found guilty, and now sits, almost 27 years later, still in prison. That's. When he gets out, I mean, it's going to be a black mark on American history, but still they've robbed Leonard of 27 years of freedom. But Leonard is in prison, and he's dinner for all of us. So he'll get out. And just that the indictment actually is against the U.S. government. And eventually that story is going to be told about what those classified documents are, and I think will reveal the true plan of the U.S. government at that time and how to kill the American Indian movement.
And
and especially for Leonard. He's been in jail for 37 years, and they're trying to do what they can to try to get him out of prison.
For all of our languages, we can't communicate. For all of our native tongues, we're all natives here. Sons of their fathers dream the same dream. The sound of forbidden words becomes a scream. Voices in anger, victims of history, plundered and set aside, grown fat and swallowed pride, with promises of paradise and gifts of beads and knives, missionaries and pioneers, our soldiers in disguise, saviors and conquerors, and they make us wait. The fishers of men, they wave their truth like bait, with the touch of a stranger's hand, innocence turns to shame. The spirit that dwelt within now sleeps out in the rain. For all of our languages, we can't communicate. For all of our native tongues, we're all natives here. And the scars of the past are slow to disappear. The cries of the dead are always in our ears. Only the very safe can talk about wrong and right, of those who were forced to choose. Some will choose to fight. For all of our languages, we can't communicate. My soul is in the mountains, my heart is in the land. I'm lost here in the city, there's so much that I don't understand. And there's quiet desperation coming over me, coming over me. I've gotta leave, I can't stay another day. There's an emptiness inside of me. I can't bear the loneliness out here. There's another place I've gotta be. Another place I've gotta be. I long for you, Dakota. Smell of sweet grass on the plain. I see too much meanness and I feel too much pain. There's quiet desperation coming over me, coming over me.
The meeting that really, I think, brought about what happened, the occupation, liberation of Wounded Knee, was a meeting at Calico, which is a small village community north of Pine Ridge, even north a little bit of what they call Red Cloud Indian School now. It used to be called Holy Rosary Mission. Small community. And I remember I was feeling, man, so proud because people were speaking about the issues of the land, of the housing, of no water, no electricity. And, you know, this is in the 60s, 70s, you know, this is 73. So all these things were happening that people were speaking on. I thought, wow, man, this is the grassroots people. You know, this is what it's all about. If we can't make change here or help the people on the res, then our movement is really, we got a lot to learn. And so these things were going through my mind, and all of a sudden they started singing this one old song. And here, this one guy on my town sheet, man, he motioned me to come over to sit down and sing. Here was Seaver Young Bear. He had his drum over there. He said, we're going to sing this chief song. So they were singing this chief song that they probably never sang for maybe 50, 60, 75, 80 years, you know, since first early parts of the reservation was formed. And because, you know, once in 1934, when the Indian Reorganization Act came, the chiefs were no longer like the significant leadership of the reservation. The tribal chairman was the leadership. So we kind of had a traditional government that was kind of like, you might say, unofficial and operated culturally and traditionally. And then we had this elected system over here. And so there was a big battle between the two. And so all of a sudden, man, this chief song, and when you hear something like that, you know, the power of that drum kind of overcomes you, and you realize that you're in a very special moment, you know, and there's a lot of power, spiritual. And then wasn't shortly after that, a woman by the name of Moves Camp, she got up, and she said, you know, she said, I'm tired of my brothers dying of alcoholism. I'm tired of my nephews coming home and they got an alcohol problem. I'm tired of my conditions of my family when I try to get water or help from the tribal government. She says, nobody wants to help, but yet we hear about all these funds, we hear about all these programs. She said, whatever happened to the spirit of Crazy Horse? She said, is he gone now, or does he still live here amongst us? Man, it was like a shockwave went through, you know, especially us as young people. Myself, Vietnam veteran, you're thinking, oh man, you know, let's go, you know. Kind of start thinking like, we got to do something, man. This is the women are asking for help. I mean, anybody with any kind of pride or cultural background or family background, you see, we got to protect the women. And so by that time, after she was speaking, the chiefs were coming across the road. And the chiefs had met with Russell and Dennis, Clyde, and some others. I wasn't in on the meeting. But at first we thought of going into Pine Ridge because we had taken over the BIA building in Washington. And so we thought, well, maybe we'll go take over the BIA building. But then through that week when we were up there having those hearings and talking to the people at Calico, they had sandbagged the BIA building with, you know, like a foxhole or beginnings of a bunker on top of the BIA buildings, and U.S. Marshals were wearing blue jumpsuits. They were staying in the dormitories up there. So different workers in the community started coming out to Calico and telling us. I thought, wow, man, this is kind of like Vietnam, man. All of a sudden we got the public, the people that's working, giving us information about the enemy, you know, what they're doing and what to watch out for. I says, you know, this is building, you know, something's going to happen. I was thinking in my own mind. And sure enough, you know, the chiefs came back across the road and they said, well, we're going to go to Wounded Knee because at Wounded Knee we won't be alone because of what happened in 1890 when our people were massacred by the 7th Cavalry. Over 300 men, women, and children. 80% was women and children. You start thinking of that, what that meant in the history of our people. And the chance to be there with those spirits. And what Alan Moo's camp had said. All those things growing through your mind, man, you're ready to run through a wall or kind of get that spirit like when I was back in Vietnam, that survival thing where you're not going to let nobody affect your survival. And the next thing is we got to get the mission, you know, what's the mission? Like when you start thinking in military terms, you know, because you want to get something done and the police are there and the lights and the marshals got their bunkers. I'm thinking to myself, these guys aren't soldiers, you know, they're police, but they're not soldiers. And sure enough, man, we decided to take off. The chief said we're going to Wounded Knee because we won't be alone. We'll have the spirits of our ancestors. This long caravan, man, it was really dramatic because it was kind of coming down towards dark in the evening. This is in February, so that's fairly early. February 27th, 1973. We're going in and see we're north of Pine Ridge and there's just one highway, so we're going south into Pine Ridge. To get to Wounded Knee, you got to go through Pine Ridge. So we got a caravan, maybe 100 cars or so, lights on, going over these little hills out in the plains. All the buildings in town are bunkers. The cops are running all over. They're coming. There's 100. We come into Pine Ridge, and instead of surrounding the VIA building, we just make a turn and go out of town. It blew their minds. They didn't know where it was going. They didn't think about their history. They didn't think about that grave out there at Wounded Knee and what it meant in the history of our people. They were thinking about AIM and how they could embarrass us or, you know, stop us cold or initiate some kind of a law enforcement, should we say like, you know, when they suspend your rights, you know, that martial law type of situation. But instead, we went right through town. So we got to Wounded Knee. No one was there. There's a trading post there. And so we went up to the church. And then some people said, well, if we're going to... And then we made a decision, well, we're going to stay here until... We said, let's have a meeting. And it was kind of... At first, we weren't thinking of staying there, like I said, and the chiefs came, and that was another thing that was so powerful spiritually. Because the elderly people, the men, the women, the children, they were all part of this caravan. So when we got to Wounded Knee, we went up to the church. You know, one of the greatest enemies of Indian people, and we ended up meeting in the basement of this church. And it was there that the elders, you know, they said, we're here in Wounded Knee. And the tribal government, they're not really our enemy. They're our people. Our enemy is the United States government. And if we're going to stay here at Wounded Knee, it's going to be behalf of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. because that's who is the real enemy, is the United States. And if they keep us fighting each other, we'll never get anywhere. And so the wisdom of those elders to change that situation, which could have been a BIA against AIM against Federal Marshal, they changed it. So the whole politics changed in that moment of the Chief Foolscrow and them making that decision that they're not our enemy, they're our people. To remember this grave and who killed him, it wasn't the BIA police. It was the United States. So we were right on the edge of that grave was the church. So I'm a Vietnam veteran, man, we start. And then all of a sudden we're just coming out of the meeting, some shots ring out. And what had happened was some people went down to the store and they were going to get some gasoline and some food supplies, and here the store was closed. But the VIA cops were coming in. They thought the people was trying to rob the store, so they opened up, tried to scare people, shooting over their heads. But other people who saw it thought the cops were shooting at our people. So then that's when things took a turn. Of our elderly people to change, that they would get involved with transporting of weapons, obvious violation of the law, but they believed what we were doing was right in confronting the institutions of government, the institution of the church. They believed, in fact, so much what we were doing, they put their life on the line. In colonial times, that, you know, these are not the good Indians. These are just rebel rousers, urban Indians that are coming to disrupt as outside agitators, men and women, young people, old people. And I think that's what really, in some ways, it antagonized a lot of the conservative elected officials of Indian tribal government. Therefore, they're not really representative of Indian people. Almost like saying, you know, like they do. There's a lot of reaction across Indian America, but for the most part, when they saw the support that we had from the elders and from the young people across America in the colleges who were flocking there of all colors, of all races, even our conservative tribal representative had to support Wounded Knee. So in a way, it's probably been one of the greatest coalitions that was ever built in the 20th century amongst our Indian people to stand up to the government.
I'm so glad that I was part of history, modern day history, modern day Indian history. I was a part of it. Not just being because Teoshpai and my family, you know, are part of that. They'll go down in history along with me. And hopefully that'll influence in the generations to come. You know, that it wasn't just an incident, you know. The Red Power movement changed our history for us. So sometimes you gotta get out there and just put it on the line. And I did it. I was part of history.
Wounded Knee has, it's like a tattoo on your heart. You know? It just becomes that nobody could ever take away the stand that we made.
Akarja, Slan Lenadini, Nahadra, Sna State Intiha, Tasha Kuig, Kade Blinta, or Hannig Columbus Heg Dutchier. Ta Kuig Kade Blinta Aguij Agav, August Tasha Vig Tredge Go Foil, as Rod Intak A Shaw, Gowil Shev Abalta Shaw Yanu, and Ye na Blaine Shaw. Ta mai Kencha Gowil and Spirit Agav, and a Goid Shaw, a Crickneyha. Tusul Agam, Gwil Cassia Midge Lecalia, La Wine, and Seer, and Mess na Cheer, Jenna Seal Shaw. Akarja, greetings to the native people of America. It's 500 years since Columbus first came to Ireland, and as a consequence of that, you have had 500 years of terrible struggle, attempting to assert your national rights, your integrity, and your way of life. It is an incredible thing that after 500 years, you have still been able to maintain your struggle, despite the incredible adversity that you have had to go through. It is my hope that one day, both the Native Irish and the Native American will meet as nations, as free Native peoples among the nations of the world.
Mitagyapi, my relatives in Ireland. Chazemita kankiduta Dakota oyate himielo. I'd like to extend my greeting and introduce myself as you know me and when I met you as Red Crow. Many years have passed since I spoke with many of you, and especially the special meeting with Gerry Adams, and also at a later time a special meeting with Martin McGuinness. We are all in a struggle in this world. And I think we are committed to our own personal struggles, no matter what the time takes, no matter how long it takes. Our ancestors told us and gave us directions on how we should view our responsibilities and our objectives. And I'm very happy to have lived in this time, to have met some of the great leaders of your people, of Sinn Féin leadership. It was my honor to be part of bringing our drum over there with our kids in our survival school. And I remember the day we were singing the drum outside of Armagh prison. And British troops came and put the guns on us and told us to leave, and we didn't even move. What were they going to do right there? But we finished our song. And that song rang out through that prison, I understand, to everybody in there. When I began to read about Bobby Sands and what our brothers were doing there, I see that. And then when I learned of the Gaelic language, of their slogan, Chucky Our Law, we will have our day, I think our struggles are common, and that in the name of Chucky Our Law, Mitakuyasin, it's the same. We will have our day too. And then meeting you, Gerry, and when you told us your first statement that you wanted to apologize to us Indian people because so many more Irish people killed more Indians than anybody else when the frontier was being extended into Lakota, Dakota land. That's because Irish people were frontline troops of the King's army. They're still being used that way, but in different forms. But we know your people, and many of your people here, and Irish people are just as beautiful as anybody else. And we share a lot of good future memories in our struggles together. I've been to Amazon jungle in Brazil and spoke to leaders there, Indian leaders. I've been to Hawaii, and I've been to Central and South America and South Pacific Islands. And there's a larger struggle going on for all of us. And I think our ways are part of a diverse world that needs respect. Our ways need respect much like yours. And as my thoughts continue on about how you are today in your health, I want to wish you good health at this time. And I would like to just sing a very special song for all of you and your people and your loved ones. Wakatanka uwanikte, Wakatanka uwanikte, Wanikte, Wakatanka uwanikte, hey yo, hey 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 hey. Wakatanka ushe mala ye ye, wayo ye ye, wayo ye ye. Wakatanka uwanikte ye, hey yo, hey ye, hey ye ye. I wish all the best blessings for you and your nation, and best of health. As we get older, I find our health is the most important thing we got. And I begin to realize how short life is. But I knew you in your time, you did the best for your people as we're trying to do for ours. Omitakuyasin.
Well, my name is Gerry Adams. I'm very pleased to have been asked to participate in the anniversary of the 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee. I'm also very mindful of the massacre by United States forces in 1890 at Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Reservation, which was the basis of the 1973 occupation. Almost 40 years ago, I had the great honour to meet a delegation of representatives from the American Indian movement who were in Ireland. Among the delegation was Clyde Bellicourt, one of the movement's founders. Clyde said, like the Irish people, we had to fight against cultural genocide. And together we, the Irish and our American Indian visitors, visited the graveside of Irish Republican political prisoners Bobby Sands, Kieran Doherty, Joe McDonnell, who died in hunger strike, along with 7 of their comrades in 1981. And the delegation from America laid a wreath at the graves of our patriot dead and chanted the national anthem of the American Indian movement to the beat of their sacred drum. And the day after that visit, the delegation travelled from Belfast to Derry, where they laid a wreath at the memorial to the 14 civil rights campaigners killed by the British Army on Bloody Sunday in January 1972. This was an example of the solidarity links between our struggles. In the years since then, I have written regularly to successive US presidents calling for the release of Leonard Peltier. I've also written to Leonard, and I take this opportunity to extend solidarity once again to him and to his clan. Leonard is the victim of a miscarriage of justice and should long ago have been freed. In 2006, he spoke of the similarities between our struggles. Leonard said, "The sufferings of our relations in Ireland are pains that we as Indian people know all too well. Our suffering, our fasting, and our struggling link us together with a common bond." Leonard is right. The Irish proverb is Arska Ahela, a Marian Ladini, translates into English as "we all live in each other's shadows." In other words, we are all interlinked, interrelated, and dependent on each other. An example of this and of the connection between the Irish and Native American peoples occurred in 1847. That was the worst year of Angarta Mór, the Great Hunger, which took over 1 million lives in Ireland over 5 years. The Choctaw Nation was originally from the Mississippi region. In 1830, 15,000 people were forced to walk 600 miles away to Oklahoma. And what later became known as the Trail of Tears, a quarter of them died. Even when they reached their new place, they were destitute and faced violence and intimidation. Despite the many dangers and challenges they faced in their own lives, the Choctaw people were moved by the accounts of the Great Hunger in Ireland. They sent a donation to the people there. One historian described the plight of the Choctaw people at that time. She said, "It's difficult to imagine a people less well positioned to act philanthropically, but act they did, and we are grateful to them for that." At a meeting, they managed to raise $170, about $5,000 today, and they sent it to Ireland. That act of kindness and generosity has never been forgotten. Consequently, during the pandemic, Irish people raised over $3 million to help provide clean water, food and health supplies to people in the Navajo Nation and the Hopi Reservation. Gerry Adams, chief of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, said that the tribe was gratified and perhaps not at all surprised to learn of the assistance our special friends, the Irish, are giving to the Navajo and Hopi nations. So one act of generosity, of solidarity, 175 years ago, was followed by another act of solidarity. Maradurtme, as I said, Aska Ahela, a Marian Ladini. We are dependent, we live in each other's shadows. So solidarity and best wishes to all of you, my brothers and sisters, participating in this anniversary event. Gunyiri and Ta Libsha.
When apples still grow in November, when blossoms still bloom on each tree, when leaves are still green in December, it's then that your land will be free. I wander her hills and valleys, and still through my sorrow I see a land that has never known freedom.